this is a travesty, and it is. It's something that's really sad that this has happened. I can imagine there's a lot of people feeling let down, not least of which probably Charlotte herself is feeling let down in herself. But I think that, gosh, if anything could potentially motivate people to change, it would be someone like Charlotte. Hi, it's Karen, and welcome to this episode of Changing Rein, which is a little bit of a different episode. It's a conversation between Mita and I, and we are discussing the incident that has arisen this week in equestrian sport, which is that of Olympic gold medalist, multiple Olympic gold medalist, Charlotte Dujardin. A video has been released of her coaching a student where her behaviour towards the horse is really less than desirable. So we thought that we couldn't let this incident go past without talking about it. Obviously the topic is a little bit disturbing. We certainly don't condone anything that was done in the video. If you haven't seen the video, there's a link to it in the show notes. You probably only need to see a few seconds to get an idea of what's going on. It's not particularly pleasant to watch, but we do hope you enjoy the episode, and if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. So let's go talk about it.
This is an unusual podcast for us because we didn't have a guest. We just thought this was an important subject that we needed to tease out between ourselves, and we thought if we needed to tease it out between ourselves, our listeners might enjoy hearing us tease it out. I thought your perspective was very good because you are asking whether Charlotte Dujardin can actually save horse sport, and I'd say straight away people say, but this could be the end. How could it save horse sport? So maybe you might tell our listeners a bit about why you've taken that approach.
Well, I've taken that approach because for Changing Rein is all about trying to save equestrian sport, I guess. So and all of my research and the work that I've done is really about trying to make things better rather than tear things down. And I just wondered whether, you know, there's so much doom and gloom at the moment, and people saying, oh my goodness, this is a travesty. And it is. It's something that's really sad that this has happened. I can imagine there's a lot of people feeling let down, not least of which probably Charlotte herself is feeling let down in herself. But I think that, gosh, if anything could potentially motivate people to change, it would be someone like Charlotte coming out and saying, hey, you know, this is bad, but these are the pressures that we have. And the vibe that I got when I watched the video was that this was probably routine kind of training. It didn't seem to me like it was anyone was particularly emotional, or people were, you know, flustered, maybe a bit of frustration, but it didn't seem like it was crazy out of the ordinary. And in fact, the person taking the video at points seems to laugh, like it's almost like it's funny. And so to me, that suggests that it's not crazy out of the ordinary. And I was thinking, well, if we put so much pressure on our equestrian athletes and our horses to be successful in sport so that they need to do these sorts of things, well, then things need to change. And maybe this is the catalyst to say, hey, you know, I'm under so much pressure and what we are demanding of our horses is so great. The only way we can get them to do these things is by training in this way. And so if that's the case, we've got, you know, things have to change, and maybe this is the catalyst.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, you and I have often chatted about whether it would be just incremental change or whether there could be a watershed moment. And it certainly seems like one of the latter for me, a watershed moment. So yeah, there's an awful lot to unpack. And the other thing we thought we might do for our listeners, because we are both interested in system thinking. So rather than kind of finger pointing and blaming, and we thought we might look at it in the round from the various perspectives of the people and the animals involved. So I think is that the way we'll approach it.
I think so, because I think it is not just, it's not a one-person issue. This is a whole industry-wide issue. And I think that, like we've been talking about throughout the whole series, is we're looking for these opportunities to make things better. And I think looking at this incident from different perspectives maybe highlights the different roles that people can play, because no one person is going to be able to fix this. This is going to be something that is going to require a team effort. So I think I'm pretty keen to look at it that way.
It makes perfect sense, absolutely, because I really didn't. For me, I'm always conscious. This is just a video. It's a snapshot in time. It's not the clearest video, certainly the ones I've seen, the versions I've seen. And, I don't want this to become a witch hunt at all. I just think there's so much in here that we are already have been talking about in different ways. I think it just serves as a really good case study for Changing Rein, just to explore. So yeah, I think that's how we should go about it.
Yeah. So one of the things I thought maybe we should just talk, like, I imagine most people listening to Changing Rein are going to know who Charlotte Dujardin is, but maybe we should just let people know that she's a dressage rider. She's been incredibly successful and highly regarded in the horse world. She's won 6 Olympic medals, 3 of them are gold. Her most famous partnership was with a Dutch warm-blood horse called Vallegro, who he retired at age 14. And she's highly successful. And up until a few days ago, she was actually an ambassador for horse welfare for the charity Brook, which is an equine charity. So, she has been highly thought of on many different levels throughout the industry. So this has come as a really big shock for lots of people. But it just makes you wonder, and I know some of my research has looked at it in terms of what motivates equestrians. I looked at amateur equestrians, but the motivations are actually quite similar between elite equestrians and amateur equestrians. But there's a lot of pressure, and I'm sure you would know this from racing too, Mita, is that, there's a lot of pressure to get results really fast. That's just the nature, because it's a business, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And I think there's a tendency sometimes to silo different disciplines and say, oh, well, that's dressage. But actually, as we say repeatedly, horse sport is horse sport. And again, the general public don't differentiate. I mean, we had the incident at the Olympics in Tokyo in the modern pentathlon. A lot of people that I spoke to thought that was in show jumping. They didn't realise modern pentathlon had a separate equestrian component to it. So horse sport is horse sport. So for my racing colleagues who might say, oh, that's happening over there in dressage, actually I think there are ramifications and implications across the whole range of sports involving horses.
Yeah, and there's been similar controversies in other sports. We had the wrapping controversy that came out a few years ago with in show jumping. We've had that Operation X, which was another dressage one. So I feel like it's a little bit naive to think that this is just an isolated thing, that it just seems like the evidence is coming out more and more. I think it is probably just that pressure in order to achieve results fast, and maybe. And remember when we talked to Andrew McLean, he sort of hinted at it a little bit when he spoke about getting horses to do these crazy moves. The training that you need to, or the pressure you need to apply to the horse to get them to do these crazy, extravagant, flamboyant moves that we see in dressage, and we've almost come to feels like expect those movements in dressage, whereas perhaps in years gone by it was less flamboyant, but the training was better. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that there's almost an expectation that a elite level performer like Charlotte is also expected to be a coach. You know, they have come up through the ranks and they are, as you say, Olympic medalists, and that's who people want to learn from. And I think it was William Micklem who pointed out that not every Olympic rider is necessarily the best coach in the world. But Charlotte is running a business. I imagine she has backers and sponsors, and she needs to generate income. And of course, people are going to be so impressed with the idea of having a lesson with someone of her standing. They're kind of trading on their name and their success. So there's, you know, the question about, is that an added pressure for these high level competitors who are also currently in competition? It's not like they have retired and are now coaching and training. They are also in competition. So there's a lot of moving parts to keep going, you know, in their operations, and a lot of pressures to deliver. So I'm sure in the Dujardin stable it's exactly the same. To achieve results in the arena, but also to run a business that attracts sponsors and attracts students, and so it's I'm sure it's not an easy task, an easy operation to run.
Yeah, and we have a lot of young horse classes. In most sports, certainly racing, racehorses start early. In dressage and the Olympic sports, there's classes for young horses coming through. So I guess it creates that expectation that you can achieve things quite quickly, and just reinforces that it's possible. And maybe if you are as skilled as someone like Charlotte, or perhaps maybe the other issue is, you know, if you're prepared to be harsh enough to get the results that you need quickly, you know. And I really don't want to be unkind, but, you know, I feel like these videos that keep appearing that show that the methods that are used on these very young horses, and also the more experienced horses, in order to get them to perform in the ways that riders need them to perform so that they can find success in competition. I think that's just, like you say, the person who has the opportunity to go and get a lesson from those people, that expectation, oh my gosh, you know, I can achieve these results, and so everyone has these really high expectations of doing things and getting them done quickly. So I think that's one of the key elements. That maybe that's the opportunity for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all gullible. I look at these online piano lessons. You know, you can play like a maestro in 6 hours. You know, and I think, gosh, you know, I know it doesn't work like that. I know it takes hours and hours. But sometimes I think, gosh, if I just click on the link, maybe I too could be a concert pianist in no time. So yeah, it's kind of the way of the world, the way of life. People just like the idea of the shortcut, getting there in half the time. You know.
Yeah, and it would be great, wouldn't it? I'd love some shortcuts. You know, it would be fantastic. But I certainly remember the words coming out of my mouth with my kids. You know, there's no magic. You have to actually just put in the time and put in the effort, and then you get the results. But it would be lovely if there was magic.
Yeah. So I suppose we don't really want to discuss, as I said earlier, you know, you had three beings in that arena. You had the coach, you had the horse, and you had the rider, and we don't really want to talk about the rider because I think we understand she's a minor. But I was struck by potentially the safety aspect, the duty of care particularly obviously if she's a minor. I mean, that's your area of research. You're very interested in horse welfare and rider safety. What did you see when you saw that video? Is that an example that would say this is not good on any front?
Yeah, totally. Like you could imagine not every horse would be as sort of benign, and the horse was clearly showing that it wasn't happy and it was trying to evade the whip and things like that. So you would think that the potential for the horse to do something quite dramatic would be quite high. And again, if this is a student who's just coming for a one-off lesson, which I think that is the case, how well does Charlotte know that horse and how that horse might react? Like, I fully appreciate she's an expert horsewoman and she probably could read the situation well. But if I was a mum and watching that lesson, I'd be pretty worried in case things might go horribly wrong, for sure. Did you have any thoughts about safety, Mita?
No, I just, to me, again, the non-rider, I wouldn't like to be in that situation. I would feel myself quite unsafe. I don't like that unpredictability of what the horse is going to do next because of a stimulus that's outside my control. So but that was just an instant reaction for me as a non-rider, and the whole duty of care that adults have, both Charlotte in the arena, but whoever's doing the videoing as well. If they saw an unsafe situation, should they step in? But again, in that moment, again, we are in the presence of an Olympic champion who everyone, you would assume, has total control of the situation, and it is hard to speak up and say, actually, I want to stop this lesson. I don't like what's happening. The sponsor has paid big money for it to happen. They've probably been talking about it for weeks. The idea of going to Charlotte. So there's a lot of pressure. It's all very well for us to sit here and say, oh, that looks unsafe. Someone should have said something. It doesn't. It's a lot more difficult in reality.
It really is, and I've certainly been in situations where I've been watching lessons where similar things have been going on with a coach who's quite revered, and it is hard to speak up. I would absolutely now I would speak up. I wouldn't hesitate, but back then, I was much younger. I wasn't as experienced. I've certainly been guilty of, observing things and thinking, oh my gosh, but not stepping in. So I can entirely empathise with people, and if you have someone who is an expert, you do defer to that.
But and that's, I suppose, why I thought it was important to put in context what appears to be happening in that video, not just say this is someone hitting a horse, with no other context. But there is something going on that in a lot of circles, most equestrian circles, would be seen as the way to train a horse, but it's gone horribly wrong. We all have to kind of take ownership of that. This is not just a maverick, newfangled way of training. So we can't just say, that's not how you do it. Of course, that is not how you do it, but we also need to talk about the better ways and explain. But it's back to those pressures that you mentioned. The better ways probably involve a lot more time, a lot more patience, and they're in short supply. Time in particular is in very short supply nowadays. So the shortcuts happen, the tempers flare, and you get these results.
I think it does. I think that raises a question that you and I have had the conversation about before as well, which is the why, the what, and the how sort of questions that as equestrians we all need to think about at some point when we're interacting with our horses. So the why question is, well, why are we asking the horse to do this? And then the what question is, well, what am I asking the horse to do? And is that a fair thing to ask the horse to do? And then the how question is, well, how am I going to ask the horse to do? And I do kind of wonder, Mita, whether the what in this situation may be the only way you can get the horse to do these particular movements is using these. And I've not trained a horse to compete in Grand Prix dressage, and I'm sure there are people that would say, oh no, you absolutely can train a horse with positive reinforcement to do these actions. And maybe you can, maybe you can't. And like you say, how long is it going to take in order to train them? So wouldn't it be wonderful to have someone come and say, hey, look, we've got open house. This is how I do it using positive reinforcement or, positive training techniques. So if anyone wants to volunteer, we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Before I actually saw the video, my understanding was that they were training their horse to do a piaffe, which my understanding is trotting in place. Obviously very, very difficult move. And a thought I had while all this was unfolding was, why not ban piaffe as a move? Why not just take it out of the expected list of movements that in dressage? Just don't require it, and therefore horses don't have to be trained to do it. Now, maybe again that's a very simplistic approach, but I was thinking about those. Do you remember those Russian or Eastern European gymnasts back in the 70s? I think Olga Korbut was one in particular that comes to mind, and she would do these incredibly technical, difficult moves to the point where they actually banned some of the moves that she was doing because they were just unsafe for other people to attempt. She was, an exceptional gymnast. She was able to do them, but there was a huge risk that other gymnasts, in trying to do those really difficult moves, would actually be injured. So those moves were not allowed in competition. And, I wondered whether something like the same approach could be taken, that we don't expect piaffe at Grand Prix level, so no one has to worry about teaching it. Now, in the video, it looked to me that that's not a piaffe. That's some sort of an extended canter. I don't know. Again, I feel such a novice here. I know that's not a piaffe because the horse was progressing down along the side of the arena. But it was something about lifting the legs higher in that particular gait, which may be different, and I presume is required. Well, see, I guess that goes back to Andrew's comment of, the expectation that you have these really flamboyant movements of the horse. So from what I could observe, it looked like they were trying to get more elevation, more leg action in the horse's canter. And I think, which maybe you can train that with a whip. But if you're asking the horse to canter and the horse is cantering, is it okay to then say, well, I actually don't like the way you canter, horse. I'm going to make you canter a different way. That's a question as an industry I think we all have to ask ourselves. Is that an okay thing to do to an animal, to say, well, you're doing what I'm asking you to do, but I don't like how you're doing it. I want you to do it differently. That's more pleasing to me, or pleasing to a judge, or, and I think that's a conversation that we all have to have if we are going to have a sport in the future, because I think if we need to train horses in this way to get these movements, then there is a huge risk that we might not have a sport. That absolutely makes sense.
So, racing often gets criticised, but at least, well, I think, and you're the expert on this, Mita, not me, but I think you just let the horses gallop how they want to gallop.
Exactly, and I had that conversation with someone yesterday. I just said, you have to train a horse to do a piaffe. You do not have to train a horse to gallop. You have to train them to conserve their energy, and like Fran Berry talked about the different speeds they're galloping, but at different speeds. But in general, a 2-day-old foal knows how to gallop. A 2-day-old foal does not know how to do a piaffe. If you want this purest expression of athletic ability in a horse, I would have to fly the flag all day for racing, because that's what you're seeing.
Look, we're not trying to sort of pit one sport against another. They all have their challenges, but I think it's just interesting.
I do need to fly the flag for racing, because we do get pilloried, and every so often it's nice to be able to say something positive. So. A couple of racing friends, contacted me, about the video and said, what does this mean for us? So yes, there's a general sense that something going on here, and we need to be having these conversations. I suppose again, and we say horse sport is horse sport. Horses are horses. So what are we seeing in the video from the horse's perspective? What's going on there?
Well, what I see when I look at the video from the horse is saying, and I'll have to say incredibly politely, please stop. Given what's occurring, if you think about it, the horse is a prey animal. The horse has someone sitting on their back, someone holding, I presume, pretty strong tension on the horse's mouth with the reins, because of the posture of the horse. So there's going to be a degree of probably pain in the horse's mouth, and that's stopping the horse from moving forward and running away from the whipping that's happening on the ground. And I imagine the rider's probably also using leg aids to keep the horse moving forward, so that's using spurs and pressure on the horse's sides. So the horse has got pressure in their mouth, which is probably pain if we're honest, probably pressure in their sides from the rider's legs, which potentially could be pain too if they're using spurs. And then you've got someone on the ground with a great big long whip whipping the horse. So that's a lot for, if that was a person, I think we would be pretty appalled at how that animal was being treated. And you see the horse kicking out, and like you said, you didn't like the way the horse would jump around. Like that's essentially the horse trying to escape from pressure that is inescapable. And I think if the video was clearer and we had more close-up footage, we would see all sorts of signs of both pain and stress on the horse's face. You can see the horse swishing their tail. There's lots of behaviour there that the horse is doing their best to say, please stop.
And again, it's back to how far do we allow, because riding involves someone sitting on their back. So how far do we allow, where's the boundary, I suppose, between what is acceptable and what is not. That's the conversation.
Look, I agree.
think it's a conversation I say a lot of horse people, I would kind of hope a lot of horse people are having that conversation with themselves and their friends about.
Like it's certainly a conversation I've had with myself, and I do choose to ride my horses still, and I think that you see examples where the horse doesn't seem to mind being ridden too much. Like I'm not. But I'm not suggesting that the horse thinks, oh my gosh, I hope I get ridden today. I don't think they probably do. But I think you can probably create a situation where the horse doesn't mind the riding. And I think, as Andrew pointed out too, in his episode, many domesticated horses don't have a lot of enrichment. So if the riding is good, it has the potential at least
Absolutely.
to create something interesting for the horse
Yes.
to do and
Yes.
break up the day.
Yes.
The horse
Yeah.
gets to travel. We know from Jake that animals like to travel places. So, you know, if you include some trail riding perhaps in your program of riding, that does have the potential to create some positive things for the horse, not all completely negative. So
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not trying to suggest, oh, we shouldn't be riding horses, but maybe we shouldn't be riding them like that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But I think the question had to be posed, and I do think horses very quickly pick up on that association being tacked up with going out in the woods or going across the plains of the Curragh or whatever it might be. They actually think, oh yeah, I enjoyed that. That's positive. So yeah, here, let's get the saddle on. Let's get going. You know, so yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, but imagine on the flip side of that, how the horse might feel knowing each day when that saddle comes out, what might come next. I think that's something that we should think about too.
Absolutely. And a couple of our guests have mentioned in those high level situations, you almost don't want to leave the arena, but that's the only place you can kind of ride your horse. But I mean, we have a guest coming up in our next series who talks about how important it is to do multiple things with your horse, not just have them arena bound, that they can get out and just be a horse, you know, going through the woods or down by the river or wherever it might be. That you have to, they have to have that kind of enrichment in their lives. So
or if you're in Australia, out in the bush.
Out in the bush, exactly. So we're talking about perspectives, and a lot of people say, "Oh, the FEI need to do something about this." It's the general response to every incident. The governing body, the regulator, someone needs to step in, take charge, take control. My own personal experience of being involved in regulation and governance is that these things take time. You will not get an instant reaction, and that's probably fair, and due process has to be followed through. But what can kind of peak bodies like the FEI do in these sort of situations? What approach should they be taking?
Look, I guess I feel like I'm a bit at a loss because I am not a regulator. I feel like you would have much more insight in this meter in terms of what they could do. Like, what would I like to see them do? I guess I'd like to see them enforce some of the rules that already exist a bit more, you know. When we know that there's challenges with horses being hyperflexed in horse sports and things like that. Roll cur is banned, but there does seem to be still a lot of hyperflexion that goes on. So if those sorts of things could be enforced more rigorously, I don't know. What's your experience?
Absolutely. And there's often this call for greater regulation, but I think ever before you go that route, I think look at what you already have. What tools have you already got in your toolbox? And I, again, not being from the equestrian world, but I'm not sure if unannounced inspections can be carried out by governing bodies into yards and stables. We can certainly do that in racing here in Ireland. I think that's a very useful tool. Now, they don't have to be confrontational visits, but they do two things. They kind of keep people on their toes because they know that they could get a knock on the door or someone at the gate at any point, at any stage. But it also is an opportunity for conversations. You know, so it might not necessarily be an enforcement visit. So it's a kind of a learning opportunity for the participants. So that possibly is another tool. But I think more transparency, because a lot of the chat seems to be, oh, they haven't seen the half of it. What goes on behind closed doors? So let's not have those closed doors. Let's have open doors. So they'd be probably my two things. So more transparency on the ground, and just that the rules there's openness about the rules and why they're there, what they're there for.
Yeah, and I think you sort of touched on it a little bit too, where you talked about having conversations about the rules or just conversations about things and the way things are done. I know that there's issues with stewards and enforcing certain rules in warm-up arenas, especially around hyperflexion and things like that. So if there's a greater culture of conversation and helping people become compliant, and if people can't become compliant for whatever reason, well then that takes us back to that question of, well, if we have to do it this way, then maybe we have to change what we're asking these riders and these horses to do. So I think that creates even a deeper conversation then if we start to go down that road and the riders are saying, hey, but we need to use this hyperflexion for whatever reason, then that creates a new conversation. So I think that would be another thing that I think would be helpful, that the FEI could definitely initiate and without making any change to any rules.
Yeah.
It's a change in culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
A change of approach.
Absolutely. And again, my understanding is that one of the potential issues is the judging in dressage. I think Inga Wolfram has done some interesting work looking at the eye movement patterns of judges and what they focus on. And I think we asked Andrew whether he thought there might be a role for some sort of artificial intelligence in the judging. Now, I know that sounds a bit revolutionary, but pattern recognition has become such... it's a really, really strong use for AI in all sorts of fields, and I don't think it's beyond the bounds of possibility that some type of pattern recognition technology could be used in dressage judging. Of course, that presupposes that there is a standard pattern that is expected, and so it's kind of what you put in is what you get out. But I think there might be something in that too, to just explore other ways of awarding marks for dressage rounds.
Yeah, or even incorporating, welfare measure into the test score. So, and I think that's definitely something where AI could be used, where horses are actually assessed in terms of levels of stress or pain or discomfort or whatever we want to. Mental state is another term we could use. But you could definitely use AI and the horse actually gets a score, and that then is incorporated into your overall result. So you might have done the most flamboyant test, but if you've got a really low welfare score, that takes you the rest of your score down. So that would be another way you could do it.
And did I read somewhere that there was talks about welfare scoring in the warm-up arena before the main arena, that they should come in with the baseline welfare score, because I know that some of the issues seem to be that things happen in the warm-up arena that don't happen in the main arena. So again, that's back to enforcement and having the people to do it. But I think there's definitely scope there to...
Yeah, there's so much scope, to make that better. And that, I guess, looking at another perspective is there's also the issue of sponsors, because when things like this happen, obviously there's a lot of reliance on sponsors and to finance a lot of the sport. So what are your thoughts on that, Mita?
I'd say every time a welfare issue arises, that's almost the first thought that comes to my mind. I think, what will sponsors think of this? That's not because I've any particular axe to grind one way or the other, but I do know that they want to be associated with things that are good, things that they don't want their brand tainted. So it's very important, I think, that we can actively demonstrate that we do things properly. And I notice a couple of Charlotte's sponsors have already withdrawn, and that's a signal in itself, I suppose. But what you'd worry about is that there could be a wholesale disappearance of sponsors from the sport.
Do you think there's a role for the sponsors to facilitate change?
Of course, yeah. You'd love to see them sitting down and saying, having those conversations, possibly with the FEI, just saying, we have expectations. I thought there could be a very, very powerful voice. And the thing is, it's social license on a large scale. It really is, because they can disappear overnight. That email will land in your inbox saying we're withdrawing our support for X, Y, or Z, and that's it. Someone in a corner office says, "Don't like this. This just does not sit with our brand. There's other ways we can spend our money." So it's something we have to be really, really mindful of. The other type of sponsorship, I suppose, is the one you mentioned about the ambassadorial roles for the charities, and that, I think it's really, really difficult for charities, because they're not trying to sell anything. They're trying to raise awareness of what they do, and ambassadors are crucially important for them. And when an ambassador lets them down, it's so devastating, because they are tainted by association, but they're doing good work. They're at big risk of people saying, "Oh, that property's all a bit of a sham." They're not. They've no judgment. Sure, they chose this person as their ambassador. They really hadn't a clue. So I don't think we'll bother giving them our money. So I think for charities, it must really, really be a difficult one.
Yeah, and I guess that does bring us back to the public. I know we've touched on it a little bit, but or even perhaps before we go to the public, the equestrian community. What role do you think they can play? Because I sort of, like you and I both agree, this is a job for all of us, not just any one person or any one group. So what?
It's been interesting. I was never big on social media. I wouldn't particularly have. I was on Twitter, but really Facebook wasn't a thing for me at all. But since we've started the podcast, I've been kind of watching various equestrian groups, and there's a range of reactions to the events of the last few days, and quite a few people are defending Charlotte and defending what we see in the video. But I think we've said this before. It's a deflection, or it's because deep down they actually feel, if I condemn what she's doing, by extension, what I've been doing all along has been wrong, and no one wants to be wrong. Well, first of all, some self-questioning. Listen to our podcast, listen to some of our guests, because I think there's lots of wisdom, even in our first short series. I've gone back to some of them, because there's really good stuff in there. But we don't want to blow our own trumpet too much. But there are sound, reliable people with wisdom out there, and it's about finding those and listening to those voices, using your critical thinking skills, thinking about what you do with your horses, and thinking about the why, the how, and the what that you mentioned earlier. And find your support. It is an opportunity. It's a wake up call.
Yeah. And a thing that I've sort of tossed around for a while is really that question of, what kind of horse person do I want to be? It's really spending a little bit of time reflecting on, well, is the ribbon the most important thing? Is the relationship with my horse the most important thing? Is the welfare of my horse what is it that I stand for? And I think that if we all decide, if the industry decides the most important thing is the ribbon at any cost, then I think that's not going to have a happy ending.
Yeah. As I think we've both said before, I think there's possibly more scope within the amateur equestrian world to make something other than the ribbon the primary goal. But once you get into the professional realms, and again, same in racing, there is no other way of enjoying being a horse person except in the pursuit of the rewards, the first prize, the gold medal, the ribbons. So it becomes a little bit trickier.
Didn't Maddie talk about that though, and rebut that idea? She talked about the greyhounds, and she talked about the fact that only one of the greyhounds in any race is going to win, but yet every owner that goes to the race can have a great night with their friends. They can watch their dog run. They take home a happy, healthy dog. And guess what? Great news is you get to go and do it all over again, in a couple of weeks' time or whenever it might be. And so, like I understand that, to be successful is really important. But I wonder, even in that environment, if you can create a broader scope to be successful.
No, that's a very fair. We should point out to listeners that one of our upcoming guests is Professor Madeleine Campbell from the University of Nottingham, who's a professor of veterinary ethics. It's a really interesting conversation with her. It is, and I think, but isn't that a mindset? And don't you have to get your head around that idea? Of course I'd like to win, but I'm also happy that my horses have run well, and we've had a nice day out, and they've come home sound, and we'll go again. Yeah, that is a useful way of reframing it. Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed our conversation. Like, I've really enjoyed it. I wonder if we should try and wrap it up. So come on, let's bring this baby home, Misha. Let's talk about what opportunities this can present for Charlotte and the industry.
Well, I think we've covered a few areas where it could definitely good could come out of this. I am a big fan of being open, of being transparent. I love nothing more than bringing people to our farm and letting them see how the place operates. I love nothing more than bringing people to the races and getting behind the scenes and explaining everything that happens. And invariably, people come away understanding more and with a more positive disposition towards what we're doing. So I would be a huge fan of openness, and I don't know what form that would take specifically in this situation, but why don't we have open training sessions or closed circuit TVs or unannounced visits by regular? I don't know, but I just think transparency. We talk about social license, and one of the absolute kernel, basic things involved in social license is transparency. People don't want to think that you're hiding something. So if we did nothing else, all of us as equestrians, and Charlotte could lead the way, be open, show what we do, and it's back to the why, the what, and the how. And explain that. And if as we're explaining it, we find that we're struggling to explain the answer to one of those questions, well, maybe we need to go away and think about why. Think about the reason why we're uncomfortable, because we will. You'll find a solution, you'll find a reason, and then you can work on that.
Yeah. One of the things that we know from research is that the horse world is a little bit... their idea of welfare doesn't align well with the latest ideas about welfare. Mm-hmm. So wouldn't it be great if Charlotte could lead a revolution in riders' understanding of welfare? Like, I think she absolutely could lead that revolution. And I think once there was a change in understanding, I think that would then help people recognise what the challenges are in either the things that they're doing or other people are doing, and see the need for change without anyone having to tell them what to do. Because I think once you have that understanding and it's clear in your mind, it's like you said with the vets, you don't need to tell people what to do. Oh, don't do this, don't use that equipment. All of a sudden, you're empowered to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I can see that this is bad for my horse. I'm going to try a different way. I'm going to find a different way. And I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I'd love it if Charlotte would come on Changing Rein. I think that would be amazing.
That would be cool. Yeah, absolutely.
We would love to talk to her. So if you're listening, Charlotte, please come on Changing Rein.
It's a big tent and everyone is welcome, because we all want the same thing.
That's it. Yeah. And we absolutely do want to build a fabulous industry that we are all proud of. That's what we're all about. So, exactly. Yeah.
And we'd love interaction. We'd love to hear what our listeners think. Maybe they disagree. Maybe they have other ideas. We have our website. We have an email address, www.changingrein.com.au. So feed in something there. Feed it in at the end of wherever you're getting your podcast. There's an opportunity to comment, because we're all in this together and we want to make it work, but we have to do it together.
So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll be talking to you soon.